Zanil hurried through the busy Lagos airport with her family, her heart racing with excitement. This trip to Dubai had been planned for months, and she could hardly believe the day had finally come. She clutched her passport and tried to keep up as her parents and siblings moved quickly ahead, weaving through the crowd. The air buzzed with chatter, rolling suitcases, and the distant call of boarding announcements. For a moment, everything felt perfect, like the beginning of a dream. But when they reached the gate, something felt off. Her family handed over their boarding passes one by one, smiling as they moved past the gate agent. Zanil stepped forward, ready to join them, only for the agent to pause and frown. "Your name isn't here," he said. Zanil blinked, sure it was a mistake. She looked toward her parents, waiting for them to step in and fix it. Instead, they looked away, silent. Her stomach dropped. Had they checked in without her? The realization hit her like a punch. She turned to her sister, desperate for an explanation. Instead, her sister leaned close, her lips curling into a cruel smile. In a voice soft enough that only Zanil could hear, she whispered, "You don't belong with us." The words stung worse than the rejection itself. Zanil stood frozen as her family disappeared down the jet bridge, their laughter echoing faintly. Around her, strangers glanced curiously, some with pity, others with judgment. And just like that, the dream trip turned into a betrayal she would never forget. Zanil stayed rooted to the spot, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched her passport. The sound of the boarding gate closing behind her felt final, like a door slammed in her face. She could see the plane slowly moving on the runway through the wide glass windows. Passengers around her were whispering, their eyes darting toward her and then away. Some of them shook their heads, as if they couldn't believe a family would leave one of their own behind. Others simply stared with curiosity, enjoying the little drama at the airport. And then she saw them, her own family, through the window of the departure lounge above. Her parents, her siblings, all pressed against the glass. Instead of worry or regret, there was something else on their faces, amusement. Her younger brother even lifted his phone, pretending to take a picture. Her sister smirked and gave a little wave, like Zanil was nothing more than a stranger being left behind. It was a cruel sight, and it cut deep. Zanil tried to hold her head high, but her chest felt heavy. The humiliation wrapped around her like a thick blanket she couldn't shake off. People nearby murmured things like, "Poor girl, her family left her." And how could they do that? The words weren't meant for her, but every syllable sank in. For a moment, she wanted to vanish into the ground, to escape the eyes, the whispers, and the sting of betrayal. The airport felt colder than before, the bright fluorescent lights suddenly harsh. She could hear the distant roar of the engines as the plane gathered speed and lifted into the sky. That sound, once thrilling, now felt like an insult. Her family was up there, sipping drinks, settling into their seats, probably laughing about the sister they left behind. The image of them pointing at her from the window, mocking her while the plane carried them away, burned in her mind. Everyone seemed to expect the same ending, that she would pick up her bag, call a taxi, and return home in shame. In their eyes, the story was simple. She was unwanted, left behind, abandoned by the very people who were supposed to love her. Even the airport staff, though professional, gave her sympathetic looks as if silently saying, "I'm sorry, but there's nothing we can do." Zanil stood there, surrounded by strangers and judgment, the picture of loneliness. The family who should have been her shield had turned into her biggest source of pain. Yet beneath the humiliation, something else stirred quietly inside her, a flicker of resolve. She didn't show it yet, not while the sting of betrayal was still fresh. But deep down, she knew this was not the end of her story. It was only the beginning. Zanil did not shed a tear. For a moment she simply stood still, watching the sky where the plane had disappeared, the same plane carrying the people who had just turned their backs on her. Anyone else might have broken down, but instead, she took a slow breath and straightened her blazer. The small gesture was enough to change her whole presence. The embarrassment that people expected to see on her face never appeared. Instead, her lips curved into a calm, almost mysterious smile. The crowd around her was still watching, waiting to see how she would react. Some thought she might argue with the staff or beg for another ticket. Others expected her to storm off in anger. But Zanil did none of that. With quiet confidence, she looked at the gold wristwatch on her hand, its shine catching the light under the bright airport ceiling. It wasn't just a pretty accessory. It was a silent reminder of who she really was. Someone far more powerful than anyone there realized. She reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and dialed a number. Her voice was steady, low, and clear. "It's time," she said, pausing for a second before adding, "Bring the jet." The people who overheard her blinked in confusion. Some exchanged curious looks, wondering if they had heard correctly. A jet! The airport staff nearby, who had been watching her with pity only moments earlier, suddenly straightened up. Their polite expressions shifted into something sharper, more alert, as if they now realized she wasn't just an abandoned passenger. Zanil ended the call with no extra words and slid the phone back into her bag. Her movements were slow, deliberate, graceful. She wasn't in a rush, because she didn't need to be. The room seemed to shift around her. The woman who had been humiliated minutes ago was no longer a victim. She radiated a different kind of energy now, one that people couldn't quite name, but couldn't ignore either. A hush fell over the small group of onlookers. Whispers started again, but this time they carried a different tone. "Did she say jet?" one person murmured. "No, maybe I misheard," another replied. Yet the doubt lingered in their eyes. The airport staff tried to remain professional, but even they couldn't hide the quick glances they exchanged. Something about her calmness made them believe that she really could be waiting for a private plane. Zanil walked toward a nearby seat, sat down gracefully, and crossed her legs. Her chin was lifted, her expression composed, as though nothing in the world could shake her. From humiliation to authority, the transformation had been instant, and it left everyone around her unsettled. She glanced once more at her watch, the hint of a smile playing at her lips. Her family thought they had left her behind in shame. What they didn't know was that she was about to arrive in Dubai in a way none of them could ever dream of. Long before the airport betrayal, Zanil had been living a double life, though not in the way most people imagine. To her family, she was always the quiet one, the sister who blended into the background. She wasn't the loudest at family gathering, she didn't brag about her achievements, and she rarely argued when others dismissed her ideas. They thought she was plain, ordinary, someone who would forever depend on them. That assumption was their biggest mistake. In Johannesburg, away from their eyes, Zanil had been carefully building something extraordinary. It started small, late nights in her tiny apartment, laptop glowing as she worked on coding projects and researched business trends. While others slept, she studied market patterns, connected with entrepreneurs, and read about how to turn an idea into a company. At first, even she doubted herself. But Zanil was patient, and patience became her secret weapon. Her first investment was in a small startup run by two young engineers. Nobody believed in them at the time, but Zanil did. That company grew, and so did her wealth. She didn't stop there. She kept reinvesting, meeting new founders, and taking risks where others hesitated. Piece by piece, she stitched together a tech empire. One app in logistics, another in finance, even a company working with artificial intelligence. Some failed, but many succeeded. And each success made her stronger. Her name was rarely on the front pages. She chose to stay in the shadows, letting CEOs take the spotlight while she quietly held the controlling shares. To the outside world, she was Madame Z, a powerful investor with sharp instincts and deep pockets. But to her family, she was just Zanil, the quiet sister who never seemed to achieve much. They never asked where she disappeared to during her frequent trips, and she never offered detail. While her siblings competed for attention and validation, Zanil was building empires they couldn't even imagine. She owned office buildings in Santon, had entire teams reporting to her, and commanded boardrooms where people twice her age listened carefully when she spoke. In private, her assistant Ao often reminded her, "You're running more than just companies. You're shaping the future of tech in Africa." Zanil would only smile, knowing she didn't need the world, or her family, to clap for her. This hidden truth explained her calmness at the airport. She wasn't just a woman left behind. She was a woman who could summon a jet with a single phone call. Every gold detail on her wristwatch, every tailored piece of her blazer, wasn't for show. It was the quiet result of years of discipline and vision. Her family had underestimated her for so long that they forgot one simple rule: silence does not mean weakness. In Zanil's case, silence was power, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal itself. Zanil's phone buzzed almost immediately after she ended her short call. On the screen was a message from Ao, her trusted assistant. "Jet is ready, madam. Pilots on standby. Hangar secured." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of years of careful planning. Zanil's lips curved into a calm smile. Nothing about this moment was an accident. For years, she had kept the jet tucked away in a private hangar on the quieter side of Lagos Airport. It wasn't for show, it was practical. Her businesses often required her to move quickly between Johannesburg, Lagos, Nairobi, and even London. Commercial flights wasted her time, and time was the one thing she refused to lose. So she invested in her own aircraft, sleek and customized to her taste, with her initials discreetly painted on the tail. Only a handful of people knew it existed, and Ao was one of them. Now, for the first time, she wasn't using it for work or a quiet escape. Today, it would serve a personal purpose. Today, it would be the answer to her family's betrayal. She imagined the look on her sister's face when she realized the quiet one they mocked had flown into Dubai hours before them. That thought alone made the sting of humiliation fade into something sharper: satisfaction. Her phone rang. It was Ao. His voice was steady, respectful, and reassuring. "Madam, everything is arranged. Security has cleared the path to the hangar. We'll have the car ready to drive you straight there. No delays." "Perfect," Zanil replied, her tone smooth, almost casual, as if they were discussing nothing more important than a lunch meeting. But beneath her calm words, her heart beat with quiet pride. Ao had been with her long enough to know she didn't waste words. As she ended the call, she stood up from her seat in the waiting area. The same strangers who had seen her humiliated moments earlier now watched her with curiosity. They didn't know exactly what was happening, but they could sense something had shifted. There was an air of importance around her, the kind that couldn't be faked. She walked gracefully through the terminal, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. 2 airport staff approached, one of them whispering into a walkie-talkie. "That's her," the man said quietly. "Instructions from the hangar. Escort her immediately." Suddenly, the same staff who had pitted her earlier now moved with urgency to assist. As they guided her toward the private exit, Zanil's thoughts remained steady. The betrayal had hurt, yes, but now she had something better, the chance to rewrite the ending. Her family thought she would be left behind in shame. Instead, she was about to leave them behind in the sky. The private exit door opened, and the night air of Lagos brushed softly against Zanil's face. The noise of the airport was distant here, quieter, more controlled. 2 uniformed pilots stood waiting for her, their posture straight, their expressions respectful. Behind them, a sleek car waited to drive her the short distance across the tarmac. The staff moved with precision, each step showing they already knew who she was and what she represented. Zanil slid into the car, calm and unhurried, while the driver whisked her past the glowing lines of parked planes. Most were the large commercial jets that carried hundreds of passengers, but at the far edge of the runway sat something different. Gleaming under the floodlights was her own private jet, white, polished, and elegant, the kind of plane that made people stop and stare. On the tail, painted in a subtle gold design, were her initials, ZN. It wasn't loud or flashy, but it spoke volumes. As the car stopped, Zanil stepped out gracefully. The pilots moved ahead of her, and 2 staff members opened the stairway door to the aircraft. She walked slowly, her heels clicking against the tarmac. People nearby, airport workers, ground staff, even a few passengers waiting at windows, paused to watch. Whispers traveled quickly through the small crowd. "Who is she?" someone asked. "That's her jet," another voice replied, disbelief heavy in the tone. "I thought she was abandoned at the gate earlier," a worker, but there was no mistaking it now. The woman they had seen left behind was no ordinary traveler. Zanil's movements were calm and confident. She didn't glance around to see who was watching. She didn't need their approval. Her focus was steady, her posture perfect, her expression serene. This was her world, and she was simply stepping into it. The stairway lit up as she reached the base. A pilot offered a respectful nod. "Welcome aboard, madam." His words carried no pity, only recognition. Zanil inclined her head politely before placing her hand on the rail and ascending each step. The sight of her boarding her own plane was almost cinematic, graceful, powerful, and unforgettable. Gasps followed her, and phones lifted discreetly to capture the moment. Some people would share the story later. "We saw her. The woman left behind by her family. She has her own jet." It was the kind of story that spread like wildfire, the kind that made people rethink everything they thought they knew. At the top of the steps, Zanil paused briefly, the soft glow from the cabin light outlining her figure. For just a second, she glanced over her shoulder, her calm smile still resting on her lips. Then she disappeared inside, leaving the crowd buzzing in stunned silence. Inside, the hum of the jet was quiet, smooth, and luxurious. This was her space, her sanctuary, and as the door closed behind her, Zanil knew the Real journey was about to begin. The cabin door sealed shut, muting the outside world, and Zanil sank into one of the wide cream leather seats. The air smelled faintly of fresh leather and polished wood, a quiet luxury she had grown used to. A flight attendant appeared almost instantly, offering her a glass of chilled champagne. The golden bubbles sparkled under the soft cabin lights, as if celebrating her victory before she even took off. Zanil accepted it with a calm nod, her fingers light on the crystal glass. She didn't rush to drink. Instead, she let the moment breathe. Outside, ground staff were still looking up at the plane in disbelief. They had seen her walk across the tarmac like a queen reclaiming her throne. Now, behind tinted windows, she was untouchable. She reached for her phone, opened the camera, and leaned back casually in her seat. With the champagne in one hand and her watch catching the light on her wrist, she snapped a single photo. She didn't need filters or dramatic angles. The truth was already dramatic enough. In the picture, the world would see her not as the abandoned girl at the gate, but as the woman who flew higher, literally. A few taps later, the photo was sent to her family group chat. Along with it, she typed only a short message, "Safe travels." I'll see you in Dubai before you even land. For a moment, she imagined their faces mid-flight as they read it. Her sister's smirk melting into shock, her brother lowering his phone, her parents exchanging uneasy glances. The very people who thought she would be left humiliated were about to realize they had underestimated her more than ever. That thought alone made the champagne taste even sweeter. The jet began to roll forward, smooth and quiet, before lifting into the night sky. Lagos shrank beneath her as the engines hummed like a promise of power. Zanil reclined her seat, crossing her legs gracefully, completely at ease. The contrast struck her. Her family crammed into economy, waiting for meal trays, while she sat surrounded by silence, comfort, and control. The attendant returned with a silver tray of fruits and delicate pastries, setting it beside her. "Is there anything else you'd like, madam?" she asked. "Not for now," Zanil replied softly, her calm smile still in place. The truth was, she didn't need anything else. She already had everything that mattered: independence, power, and the satisfaction of knowing her family's betrayal no longer held power over her. As the jet sliced smoothly through the clouds, Zanil closed her eyes for a moment. She wasn't running from humiliation anymore. She was flying toward triumph. Every mile between Lagos and Dubai was another mile of silence her family would be forced to sit with, wondering who she really was. At 30,000 feet, the cabin lights were dimmed and most passengers were settling in for the long flight to Dubai. The hum of the engines was steady, almost soothing. Zanil's family sat together, still feeling proud of themselves for what they had done at the airport. Her sister, in particular, wore that same smug smile, convinced Zanil would be sitting at home crying while they soared above the clouds. Then her brother's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen casually, expecting some random notification, but froze when he saw the picture. His eyes widened. "No way," he muttered. "What is it?" their mother asked. He turned the phone around. On the screen was Zanil, sitting back in a wide leather seat, champagne in hand, the cabin of a private jet glowing behind. Her expression wasn't angry, wasn't even sad. It was calm, almost playful. Underneath the photo, the words were short but sharp: "Safe travels. I'll see you in Dubai before you even land." For a moment, there was silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy, pressing against your chest. Then her sister snatched the phone, her smirk vanishing the instant she saw the image. She read the words again and again, as if they might change the more she stared. Their father leaned closer, frowning deeply. "Is this real?" he asked, his voice uneasy. "It has to be," the brother replied. "Look at that jet. Look at the initials on the seat, ZN." Whispers rose among them, nervous and confused. They had always believed Zanil was the quiet one, the one who never accomplished much. Yet here she was, not on the ground crying, but in the sky above them, drinking champagne in her own jet. The sister tried to laugh it off. "Maybe she borrowed it from someone," she said weakly, but even she didn't sound convinced. The truth was too obvious. Zanil wasn't borrowing anything. She owned it. The more they thought about it, the more it sank in. The gold watch, the tailored clothes, the trips she always took for work. All the little signs they had ignored suddenly lined up into a picture they had been too blind or too arrogant to see. Zanil wasn't just successful. She was wealthier and more powerful than all of them combined. As the plane continued through the night, the mood around their row shifted completely. Gone was the smug laughter and cruel satisfaction. In its place was unease, even fear. What would she do in Dubai? Would she confront them in public? Would she expose their betrayal to others? Her sister, once so sure of herself, now sat stiff in her seat, staring at the back of the headrest as if it could give her answers. Her parents exchanged quiet looks, both unsettled by the truth they had spent years overlooking. Far above the clouds, in the same sky but in very different worlds, the family realized they had mocked the wrong person. And there was no escape from what awaited them when they landed. The sun was already rising over Dubai when Zanil's jet touched down smoothly on the private runway. The city glowed gold in the early light, its towers shimmering against the sky. While her family was still cramped in their commercial seats somewhere over the Arabian Sea, Zanil was stepping off her jet with quiet grace. A black luxury car waited at the foot of the stairs, and the staff bowed slightly as they opened the door for her. The ride into the city was quick, the streets calm in the early hours. When she arrived at the hotel, the tall glass doors opened automatically, and a team of staff greeted her like royalty. "Welcome back, Madam CEO," one of them said warmly. Another hurried forward to take her bag. Heads bowed respectful, voices softened in her presence. This wasn't new to them. They all knew her, and they knew how much she meant to the business world in Dubai. She was escorted directly to the penthouse suite at the top of the hotel. The elevator opened to reveal an entire floor reserved just for her. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, chandeliers glittering in the morning light. The view stretched endlessly over the city and the sea beyond. Zanil walked through the space with ease, as if she had been born into this kind of luxury. though the truth was she had built it all herself. By the time her family's plane finally landed hours later, Zanil had already changed into a stunning evening dress and prepared for the night ahead. In the penthouse dining room, a long polished table was set for an elite dinner. Guests were already arriving, business leaders, investors, and influencers who greeted her warmly, shaking her hand, calling her name with respect. Waiters moved quietly, filling glasses and arranging dishes as laughter and conversation filled the room. At the head of the table, Zanil sat with calm authority. She didn't brag, didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Everyone around her already knew who she was. To them, she wasn't the quiet sister or the forgotten one. She was Madam CEO, a woman who had built power and respect with her own hands. When her family finally arrived at the hotel, tired from their long flight, they were stunned to see her name displayed at the entrance, her photos on discreet plaques honoring top business partners. The staff bowed to them politely, but led them upstairs with the kind of deference usually reserved for royalty, because of Zanil. And when the doors of the penthouse opened, they froze. There she was, seated confidently at the center of a glittering dinner, surrounded by people far more powerful than they had ever dreamed of meeting. Glasses clinked, laughter flowed, and in that instant, they realized the truth. They hadn't just left her at an airport. They had left behind the one person who had already soared far beyond. The dinner was in full swing when the staff quietly led Zanil's family into the penthouse. The clinking of glasses, the soft music, the low voices of powerful men and women filled the air. At the long table, Zanil sat at the head, radiant in her evening dress, laughter dancing around her like light. Her family stood frozen at the doorway, unnoticed at first, until Zanil slowly lifted her glass. The room hushed. All eyes turned toward her. With effortless grace, she rose from her chair. Her gaze swept the table before landing, at last, on the faces of her family. They looked small now, shaken, uncomfortable, out of place among the city's elite. She raised her glass higher, her voice calm but clear enough for everyone to hear. "You left me at the airport like luggage," she said, the words sharp yet smooth, cutting without being loud. A ripple of shock passed through the room. She paused, allowing the weight of her words to sink in, then added with a steady smile, "But I don't fly economy with betrayal." Silence followed, thick and heavy. The guests glanced at one another, some hiding smiles of admiration. Her family's faces burned with shame, their earlier arrogance shattered. Zanil took a slow sip of champagne and sat down again, unbothered, surrounded by respect that could never be taken from her. The moment belonged entirely to her, and her family finally saw the truth. She was not the forgotten one, not the quiet shadow in the corner. She was the center of the room, the power at the table, the woman who had risen above them all.